Around 30,000 babies were murdered last year in the state of Texas, and their bodies were flushed down the Texas sewage system because Texas pro-life groups helped kill an equal protection bill. So while abortion is quote-unquote illegal on paper in Texas, they write clauses into the laws that say, but the mother can never be prosecuted. So now all a woman has to do is order the abortion pill online. It comes to her mailbox at her home. She takes the two different regimens of the abortion pill and forces her body to have contractions, and she dumps the baby into the toilet, and then she flushes the toilet. That happened almost 30,000 times last year.
Welcome back to the For Liberty and Justice podcast, where we seek to mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice. I'm your host, Joshua Moore, and we have an exciting episode coming up. I say that every time because they're all exciting, and this one especially because we are diving into a very controversial issue, and it's only controversial because the kingdom of darkness is pushed hard, and we got to push back. The enemy's gates are there. We're in front of them. We have to push hard. We are sending warfare to their gates. And I am so excited and happy that we have a guest, Seth Gruber, who is on the front lines fighting for life in the womb, and really our most vulnerable. That term gets thrown around a lot, most vulnerable. But the reality is these little babies are our most vulnerable. So Seth, I just want to kick this off. What inspired you to get involved in this fight? Because you are passionate about this topic, and I love it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Well, Mercy Culture and the various ministries here, such as For Liberty and Justice, are very important to me and my team. It's hard to find, even post-2020, it's hard to find really mobilized, engaged, and awake churches who know that to stand and to speak is not an option anymore. This is a requirement. This is something that the church has to do. And so it's good to be here with you, and so appreciate everything that Liberty and Justice does. I mean, I was just bragging about you guys to someone. I was like, this ministry out of this church, they've flipped like 99 seats with spirit-filled Jesus lovers in all manner of political seats over the last few years. And I like telling that story just to say, like, this is possible. Like, churches can do this. And we had Pastor Landon share that as well at a conference I did in DC in January, just a few months ago, called Life or Death Con, the day before the March for Life. So anyways, it's good to meet more of the Liberty and Justice team. I mean, we shouldn't kill babies. I don't know why that's so shocking. A lot of people always want to know, when did you take on this issue? How did you become so awake and immobilized? And, the snarky side of me wants to say, because it's a genocide, what are you doing? Right.
That's true.
It's like, wow, you're so fired up. Why are you so fired up about this? I'm like, I don't know. Why aren't you? So I think to some extent the church has like lost or forgotten how to hate evil. And so we say, oh, killing babies. Oh, that's not very good. Well, at least we have another group over here that's dealing with that, instead of determining what should we do in our individual lives. But, the answer you're looking for, Josh, is I was raised in a Christian pro-life homeschool family in Los Angeles County. I was homeschooled through 8th grade, and then I went to public high school. But my mom ran a pregnancy resource center in Los Angeles County in the late 80s, before she actually married my dad. And she was saving babies and loving on moms and walking with them and helping them choose life. She would often babysit the children whose lives she saved as unborn babies when they were toddlers, because the deadbeat dad wasn't in the picture and the single mom needed help. So this was part of my mom's heart and her passion and commitment. And then my parents got married in 89. I was born in 91, and she was still leading this pregnancy center while pregnant with me. So I like to say I've been a pro-life activist since I was a fetus, long time. And she stepped down when I was born, and had my two sisters, and homeschooled us. But we remained involved in our local pregnancy resource center. We did their annual Walk for Life to raise the money. My mom was a representative of the ministry at our church, just kind of pushing the life issue, making sure the pastor wasn't just, dismissing it. And then my senior year of high school at Whittier High School, Nixon's alma mater in Los Angeles, I picked abortion as my senior project. And so you had to write an essay, you had to give a speech to a panel of teachers at the end of the year, and you had to do volunteer hours somewhere that associated with the topic that you were writing about.
Right.
You had to do this to graduate. So I picked abortion. And my high school told me that I could not pick that topic. And now I was 18. I was a little bit of an older senior. And I realized that I didn't have very many good answers to a lot of my pro-abortion friends on the sports team and stuff like this. And of course, this was back when like pro-choice people actually could be friends with pro-life people. Today, they they want to kill us. Actually,
yeah, true.
But back then it was like, oh, okay, whatever. And you still get along. But I was like, man, I need better answers to my friends who think it's okay to kill babies. And so that was the main reason I picked the topic of abortion. So I told my high school, I said, here's a copy of the Constitution you're making me read in government class. I recommend you read it or you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. And I'll sue you for viewpoint discrimination. Ooh. So I was 18 at that point, and they didn't know that I was a homeschool kid who had memorized the entire preamble to the Constitution, the entire Declaration of Independence by the time I was 11, because my mom had made us do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Go homeschool mom
and justice.
That's right. That's right.
And knowing our rights, knowing who founded this country, knowing the ideas that made this country great.
That's right.
And the foundational premises that it was built upon. And that was important to my mother and father. And so they didn't know who they were dealing with, and they backed off immediately and never said anything. And I picked abortion, and I did that for my senior project. Cool story aspect about that, Josh, is the next year when I was a freshman in college, I went back to my high school alma mater's website to the section where the document was that said senior project guidelines, and it told you the topics you could not pick.
Oh my gosh.
Abortion being one of them. The document was gone. So it's this fun, interesting little story of a lesson I learned at 18 that I've taken with me today and into really the tone and tenor of my ministry, the White Rose Resistance, which is sometimes it just takes one person standing up and looking the Faustian little tyrannical gay communist dwarves in the face and saying, you know what, sit down. And they often do. One man plus God equals a majority. And it's never taken 51% to win a war or to turn a country right side up. So that was pretty formative for me. And my field work hours, my volunteer hours, were at a pro-life organization in Orange County that my mom used to be on the board of directors for. And the first thing they had me do, this was December of 2009, Christmas break of my senior year. They said, here's 300 images of first trimester mutilated, dissected, emaciated, aborted baby photos. You need to scan these on this high quality scanner. Name all of the files and categorize them in our database for educational projects. So this organization uses abortion imagery, and they put them on airplane banners. They put them on box body trucks, and they use them for genocide awareness projects on college campuses, which I've done these on maybe a dozen different college campuses where you set up these huge, I'm talking like 12-foot long, 7 feet high or something like that, images. And it's shocking, but of course, Ephesians 5:11 says have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And most people have never seen what abortion does to a baby. So here I am, I'm 18. My mom used to run a pregnancy center. We do the Walk for Life for the little babies every year, and I'm a homeschool kid, and I've never seen these images.
Wow.
So for 2 days straight, about from 9 to 5, I'm sitting looking at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 week. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 week babies with their heads and eyeballs and lips and fingers and toes all scattered on tables in images. And I'm categorizing them and looking at these for 2 days straight of what choice looks like. So that changed my life. And that was kind of the turning point. I was sitting in that little office in December of 2009. I'm looking at this, and I just started fuming inside.
Yeah, there's that righteous indignation.
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
That was the background. Then I went off to a fake Christian college, and I was a pain.
I love that fake Christian
college. I was a pain in the rear there too. So that's the background. Yeah.
No, thank you. I laughed at that comment, the fake Christian college, because I feel like that's oftentimes what most of them are today. I think it's so important though. You bring up the atrocity of it, and I think it's also important for people to understand, the viewers and those out there who may be watching, that this issue is not very new. The founding fathers actually dealt with the thing. It was called back then infanticide. And it's one reason why William Blackstone, and then a little bit later, James Wilson, both the signer of the Declaration, signer of the Constitution, as well as one of the first Supreme Court justices appointed by George Washington, straight up says that once the baby begins to stir in the womb, it then has rights.
Quickening.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so the founding fathers believed in this. They understood
didn't have
it.
The science at that point, so they just associated the personhood and rights with one that moved.
Boom, just like
but if
that.
they had our level of embryoscopy,
that's exactly right.
and medical advancements today, they would have been saying federal abolition of abortion in the 14th Amendment from the moment of conception.
And why would they?
Talk more about that.
Yeah, why would they support it? Because they believed that it was a natural right. They didn't need science to say, well, life actually begins. They said, no, this is life. A fetus is Latin for baby. So when we're looking at
offspring or
that's
small
right.
child, yeah.
That's right. And so when we're looking at this issue, it's so important for people to realize that it should be empowering for people. And you are the embodiment of that, especially lately in the last few years when you've been starting to really get out there in the public. And I think that's so important. So here's a question I kind of want to ask you and sort of take the conversation in this direction. What is the consensus that you're now seeing? And I use that term loosely because I don't believe that consensus or morality is based on consensus. It's based on the word of God. But I know a lot of Christians have been scared to death.
You sound like a Christian nationalist.
That's right.
You a Dominionist?
No kidding. Oh my gosh. Take dominion. Do what Genesis said to do. Oh my gosh. Make babies, be fruitful, and multiply. How dare I quote the Bible that I claim to believe in?
But isn't it funny though, Josh? Actually, that's actually funny because when do we see the left get the most? Like, when do they manifest transgender rainbow unicorns the most? It tends to happen on Christianity 101, on the most basic aspects of Genesis 1.
Every single time.
They don't really get that up in arms when, I don't know, we're like talking about, this form of curriculum or, this sort of tax code and, what's it moral or immoral to tax people? And, we could think of plenty of other, political issues that, the left doesn't really lose their minds about. But as soon as we say things like, hey, you should have a ton of babies.
Oh, actually, I know.
Because you know who just said this? The mean tweeting Orange Man.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Did you see this?
I didn't, but I think he said it.
Trump's pushing legislation that will financially incentivize families to have more babies. And he's saying we need to have more babies. And by the way, everyone gets all weird about Trump. Celebrate him when he does good things. Rip him a new one when he does bad things. This is a self-governing republic. Raise your voice. The evangelical voting bloc is the largest voting bloc in the country, but it's the weakest because they don't actually show up and vote. So Trump right now, he's a tourniquet. He's holding back evil. He's helping stop the blood. So we have time to push back. But he said this the other day. He's pushing legislation for this. And by the way, more Western countries have been doing this in Europe. Have you been seeing this over the last 10 years? Mm-hmm. They're trying so hard to get back at least to replacement rate.
Correct.
Because every Western nation is under replacement rate, except maybe one. And so Elon Musk has a point. Like, you don't need to be a Christian that believes in the cultural mandate to notice countries, civilizations, societies don't survive into perpetuity unless they're over replacement rate.
That's exactly right.
And so this is the problem here as well. Of course, the Dems want to solve this replacement problem by shipping in a bunch of illegals and getting rid of the wall. So Trump goes, we need to have more babies. Women need to have more babies. Families need to have more babies.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton loses her flipping mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just saw, she was just speaking at this thing and she was talking about how chauvinistic bigoted these comments were. But it just made me think, it's like, anytime it comes to, Imago Dei, that we get that from Genesis 1, you creating the image of God, male and female, he created, so male and female, so there's only two genders. So Eve came from Adam. And as his helpmate. And so, so marriage is only a man and a woman. So, Pete Buttigieg might like to do weird sex things, but he's actually not married to Chasen because that's not a marriage. And lastly, what's the last thing in Genesis 1? Make a bunch of babies.
That's exactly
and fill
right.
the earth and subdue it. Like, what issues cause the left to lose their freaking minds? When you say don't kill babies, Imago Dei, sanctity of life in Genesis 1. You're not married to a man, Pete. That's impossible. That's not a marriage.
Right.
June is not gay rainbow sodomy month. It's life month, and we're taking away your pride month. And 3, there are only men and women. And so we're going to ban all of these surgeries, not just for children, but for everyone. And 4th, what Trump just said, we need to start having a bunch of babies.
Yeah.
Those 4 talking points causes the left to lose their freaking mind.
I know.
And I think it's just a reminder. And those were things that the Democrat Party took for granted, by the way, just in 1950. Like, that shows you how quickly this has progressed.
Oh, yeah.
And it also shows you that these were never viewed as political issues. You know this because you were a politician, so you know this better than me. In the 1950s, and I would actually push it to the 60s, almost every Democrat, and I don't mean the voting Democrats, that's a duh. I mean the Democrat politicians.
Mainstreams. Yeah, exactly.
Basically, all of them would have said, don't kill babies in the womb.
Yep.
The Democrat Party was pro-life in the 60s.
Yes, it was.
The 50s. They would have said, yeah, obviously. I mean, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton said in 2003 and 2005 that marriage is a man and a woman. We need to stop talking about it. And it's never going to be anything but a man and a woman.
Obama even defended it when he was president.
That was 03, 05.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously in the 50s, every Democrat would have said,
Sure.
What is gay marriage? What are you talking about? Every Democrat in the 50s and 60s would have looked at you. They probably would have had like an aneurysm if you told them that there were 140 genders and we should chop the genitals off of 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
So they would oppose transgenderism, and they would have said it's really important for couples, particularly Christians, to have a lot of babies.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of those issues are quote unquote political. Why? Because the enemy has always sought to attack the culture, the country, and God's created order at the most foundational basis. So when you can upend families, and all 4 of those truths from Genesis 1 have to deal with the family.
They do.
You can destroy the country. You can spoil the future, and you can destroy a country. And so, it's fascinating. And I just wish churches would have the moral clarity that you guys have for liberty and justice to see that this is not even quote unquote political. It's theological and spiritual, but it has political ramifications.
That's
the left
exactly
is
right.
Fighting these battles on a political landscape.
Yep.
And if you don't meet them on that political landscape, you're a coward. You're a good for nothing shepherd, because a shepherd doesn't just brush the sheep's fur and give them snacks. A shepherd sometimes has to like go full ninja, like baller, and just start like murdering wolves and whacking them on the head.
Yeah.
And if you won't meet the radical, secular, moral, revolutionary, diddle the kids, pederast, weirdo leftists on the political battlefield as a Christian, because you want to maintain your witness, and if you get too political, that friend you're evangelizing to might never come to church because he learned that you voted for Trump, then you're a coward.
No, it's so true. And I'm glad you brought up the political / spiritual aspect of this. Shameless plug here. I wrote a book, published it last year, The Black and White Constitution and Its Shades of Gray. And in one of the chapters, I actually talk about...
I never thought I'd tell someone else to slow down. That's usually what say the name of the book again.
The Black and White Constitution and Its Shades of Gray. And so when I published this book, one of the chapters that I focused on is in fact titled, I should say, If It's Public, It's Political.
Right.
And that's because politics is the city-state. It's the commune that we are in together. We are not robots. We are rational beings with a soul and feelings and a heart and a mind, all those things that God put inside of us.
Yep.
And so to your point, Seth, when we're talking about getting involved in meeting people on the battleground, we're taking the Spirit of God as our backing, and we're being vessels to fight on this front, because this is important. It's a political battle that needs to be addressed with laws, because laws are reflective of God, or ought to be reflective of His moral code and His moral law. But they're not, unfortunately, and we've got to get back to that. And so that's a nice segue to something that I really want to dig into and find out from you. You go across the country, you're talking to tens of thousands of people and meeting people and getting involved in the front lines of this fight. What are you hearing people talk about? Are people getting more and more passionate about the pro-life issue, and even connected to the idea of Trump not being as a president 3.5 years from now and moving on to the next one? Because that's what people talk about a lot. They go, well, Trump's going to fix it. I even heard a guy the other day said he's the great reset and then we can move on. And I'm like, well, you make it sound like it's just Trump, one man goes in, wipes things clean, and okay, I cleaned house. You guys are back to normal, back to the way it was in 1776. Man, I wish it were that easy, but it ain't.
Oh yeah, that's
what are you seeing on the front lines? What is the feeling that people have? Are they sticking to that? Or are they actually getting involved with the fight in the pro-life movement?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, it's still shocking how many churches don't get it and aren't doing anything. But they would say that their values aligned. Like they would say, oh yeah, we're with Mercy Culture. We believe that you shouldn't kill babies in the womb. And we believe that children shouldn't be shown porn in the schools. And we believe that drag queen story hours should not be happening in the public square. And they certainly shouldn't be family friendly. And they, like, you know, a lot of churches, they would be values aligned with those proclamations, but they won't do anything. They won't talk about it from the pulpit because they're cowards, actually.
I totally agree with that.
That's part of my talk today here at the conference, at Reformation Conference. But and so it's still shocking to me how many churches don't really get it. But I think that there's been a undeniable rise or tick up in the number of churches that are beginning to get mobilized.
Yeah.
And I was with my then pastor Rob McCoy and Charlie Kirk when they were launching Turning Point Faith, TPUSA Faith, because I was at Godspeed Calvary Chapel. That was our church in Southern California. Pastor Rob, who co-founded Turning Point Faith with Charlie, and was the first church to ever give Charlie a pulpit to speak from ever. And so my family and I were at that church.
That's great.
Pastor Rob was going back and forth between LA and Phoenix, aligning this ministry. And I watched an incredible number of churches begin to join the mission that they were building with Turning Point Faith and getting churches engaged culturally and politically. And then I was in many of their churches speaking, and a lot of their churches are the reasons that the White Rose Resistance that God's blessed it to the extent that he has. So there's been a noticeable rise in the number of churches in comparison to 2019 who were engaged in the fight. I don't think we're anywhere that we need to be yet. But, you know, God always uses underdogs. You know, and like I said, it never takes 51%, you know.
No, that's true.
But more specifically to your question, I don't think people understand how significant politics is.
Yeah.
I agree with you that if the church doesn't wake up and something doesn't change in our cities at the cultural level, at the local level, which is where the most important fight is, you know, then we'll get Gavin Newsom in 2028 and everything will go back to something really horrible.
Yeah.
But that's not an excuse to disengage from the political
fight. Exactly right.
And so, like, people, you know, the line from Andrew Breitbart that politics is downstream of culture.
Yes, correct.
And so the kind of culture you have dictates the sort of politics you'll have. And so how is culture built? Filmmaking, storytelling, movies, Saturday Night Live, TV shows, art, rap, various forms of music. Okay, so these things make up culture, and they shape the hearts and minds of the next generation. And so that next generation is going to be a product of that culture. And then they're going to go run for office, and your politics is going to fundamentally change because you weren't fighting on the cultural. But that's self-evidently true. That's axiomatic. But it's actually a two-way street, though, actually. And this is really important for the church to grasp, and it aligns perfectly with your mission here for Liberty and Justice. It's true that politics is downstream of culture, but culture is also downstream of politics.
Yes, it is.
And what could we think of some examples of this recently, Josh? Okay, here's an example. Saturday Night Live, 2 or 3 months ago, just did a skit mocking gay couples as baby thieves. Okay,
I did see that.
I did. Let's just say that again in case you thought you misheard me. Saturday Night Live just did a skit 2 or 3 months ago mocking gay married dudes as baby thieves. And in the skit, the two other heterosexual couples are like, is this a PG-13 podcast? Okay.
Yeah, basically.
They're like, we were with you. You have a baby? Where did you get this baby? Last night we were with you at the nightclub, and you said that today you were going to the Bulge Festival. So where did you get this infant?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, she chose us. And they're like, what do you mean? And then the heterosexual couples are like, did you steal this baby?
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live.
I know.
Showing
it's mind-blowing.
Male-female couples asking a gay couple, you don't have a vagina. You don't have a birth canal. So where did this child come from?
That's right.
Did you steal this baby? So question for everyone listening. Would Saturday Night Live have done that skit if Kamala Harris had become president?
That's a good.
No,
I don't think they would.
No. The answer is no. They would not have done that. So that's an example of politics impacting culture. What are some other examples? All of the corporations who've been abandoning their DEI. Why? Well, in part because of my buddy Robbie Starbuck, who's like totally exposing all these DEI things, but also because of the Trump administration.
Yeah, correct.
That's going after all this DEI stuff.
Yes.
That's politics impacting culture. What's another example? Abortion is another example. In the 60s and 70s. In fact, in 1969, 1970. So the first states to begin to legalize abortion are in 1970. If I'm remembering correctly, it was, don't hold me to this, but I think the states in 1970 were the first states to legalize abortion was Washington, Colorado, and possibly Alaska. But Colorado and Washington were some of the first states ever. And so in the late 60s, early 70s, the median annualized number of babies that were being killed was around 100,000. That was the median of babies being killed each year. In 1973, we get Roe versus Wade and its companion case, Doe versus Bolton, which legalizes abortion through point of birth
Right.
for any reason or no reason at all in all 50 states.
Yeah.
By 1975, 1976, just 2 or 3 years after Roe v. Wade, you want to know the annual abortion number?
I'm afraid to hear it.
1.5 million.
Yeah, I figured it was going to be over 1 million. That's so sick.
So that's an example of politics impacting culture. Last example. Ever heard of East and West Germany? East Germany today is over 50% atheist.
Oh, interesting.
While West Germany is only 10% atheist.
Wow.
So what explains that? As my buddy Michael Knowles says, is that a regional variation in bratwursts that explains the huge disparity in religiosity? No. That's because the East Germany government was dominated by an official atheistic regime that pursued a ruthless policy of stamping out Christianity for years, and that had cultural effects.
Yes, correct.
Even after the East Germany government went away.
Yeah.
So those are a few examples. You could probably think of 5 more off the top of your head right now.
Great.
Of politics impacting culture. It's a two-way street. It's a concentric circle.
That's exactly right.
And it always has been.
No, that's so true. I'm glad you brought that up because, in fact, the great Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice that passed away a number of years ago, brought this very point up. And I'm going to, of course, paraphrase, but he essentially said that even though it's not logical, what ended up happening after Roe v. Wade was because it was, quote, legal, even though it technically wasn't, but even though it was presumed legal and decided by a Supreme Court, there was an entire two and a half generations of women growing up, and men too, who thought that it was moral because it was legal. Not so much legal because it was moral, but
because law is a teacher.
And that's exactly right. That's something that Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire has been talking about for quite some time, is that the law is a teacher, but he's not the first person to bring it up. Many philosophers have brought that up. And in fact, God himself in his word brings it up, talking about how the law is imprinted on your heart, and you can teach it to your kids when you're going in, when you're coming out and going to bed and waking up.
Let's make your podcast really uncomfortable, then.
Oh, I love it. Let's do it.
If law is a teacher and you're actually teaching moral truths through legislative action, through lawmaking, of course, you can teach immoral truths, right?
You can
communicate a lie through lawmaking as well.
Yep.
But in its proper function, the law should be proclaiming things that are true about human nature.
That's exactly right.
And the way the world operates.
Natural law.
And yes, of course. And of course, this is the basis of all of the founders'
That's exactly
beliefs, even
right.
the ones who were, you know how the left loves to say, all the founders were deists. No, they were not all deists, but some of them were. But even the ones who were, still walked in this natural law tradition. And so obviously we're talking about abortion, but anytime you talk about abortion, you're talking about 50 other topics because all this stuff kind of relates.
Because it goes down to morality.
But if law's a teacher and we should tell the truth through law, then we need to criminalize abortion for everyone involved.
I agree.
And
it's called legislating morality. Every single nation does. That's exactly right.
But there are, you're a pretty sharp guy, Josh. So, if I was speaking to someone else less sharp than you, I would say that you would be shocked at the number of multi-million-dollar funded pro-life organizations who don't just believe that women should be able to kill their children with impunity and immunity, but they actually actively work against conservative Republicans at the state level who are trying to criminalize abortion for all parties involved, meaning they write letters and they put pressure. Most of this gets started by Susan B. Anthony List. And most of it gets started by them. Yeah. And then they get all the other pro-life establishment organizations to their CEOs to write letters. And then they send these they're actively putting pressure on like solid Republican, not rhino Republicans, conservative Christian Republicans who are trying to end abortion in their state. And they put pressure on them to say, don't pass this equal protection bill. And all we mean by equal protection is that your pro-life beliefs and principles should be connected to your lawmaking.
Right.
That's all it means. So if we believe that the child in the womb, what does it mean to be pro-life? It actually means to say that there's no value-giving difference between the unborn child we once were and the adult we are today that would justify killing us at that earlier stage.
Right.
And that philosophically, the differences between the unborn child and the infant are not justifiable reasons to slay them in the womb. So the child may be less developed, more they might be smaller, right? They might be more dependent on their mother. They might have cognitive abilities that are not fully developed yet, and they're still unfolding them. But by the way, that's still happening to teenagers. Teenagers. There's a reason why by the way, there's a reason why rental car companies don't let people rent cars till they're 25. Do you know why that is? Because your prefrontal cortex is not developed enough yet, and you make stupid decisions.
Yeah.
Hey, 21-year-old, you make stupid decisions because you're still developing, and your ability to categorize and evaluate risk is not matured enough yet, so we're not going to rent you this car, right? So even young men are still unfolding different aspects of their development that it's not fully realized yet,
right?
But it doesn't mean they're not full persons right now.
Correct.
The same is true with the unborn child.
Yeah.
So we're all in a different continuum of human development, but the continuum began at the moment of conception. So all we're saying is that if the child in the womb is equal in dignity, value, and a right to life to any infant or toddler, then they should have the same legal protections that infants and toddlers have. So if we're going to communicate the truth and law as a teacher, then even mothers and fathers who are going to kill their babies through abortion, the abortion is, I'm saying everyone involved. I'm not trying to target mothers. Everyone involved in killing an unborn baby needs to be criminalized. It has to be treated the same as if you were to drown your infant in the bathtub during bath time.
Absolutely.
Or else it will never end. And so this is part of liberty and justice. I mean, this is telling the truth through law. And so we're in Texas, right, Josh? Guess what? 30,000 babies, around 30,000 babies were murdered last year in the state of Texas, and their bodies were flushed down the Texas sewage system. They were flushed down the toilets of Texas. Why? Do you want to know why? Because Texas pro-life groups helped kill an equal protection bill. So while abortion is quote unquote illegal on paper in Texas, they write clauses into the laws that say, but the mother can never be prosecuted. So now all a woman has to do is order the abortion pill online. It gets shipped from India. It comes to her mailbox at her home. She takes the two different regimens of the abortion pill. And forces her body to have contractions, and she dumps the baby into the toilet, and then she flushes the toilet. That happened almost 30,000 times last year in 2024, Josh, in Texas. Come and take it. Well, no, they don't have to come and take it. They don't have to come after you at all, as long as you say,
I'll do this.
No
for
one
you.
can kill unborn babies. No one can kill unborn babies except their own mother. So that's the reality in Texas right now. So until we begin to fight on the political landscape to protect who you said at the beginning of the program, rightly so, the most vulnerable, then none of this is going to change.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, our founder and representative and pastor, Nate Schatzline, is serving in the Texas legislature, and
Nate.
He is working directly in that vein and trying to get the abortion pill banned and, passing conservative, Christian, biblically based and sound pro-life legislation, but not just on the pro-life front, porn in schools, which is something, again, that is a different topic, but the church is so terrified of addressing this, where and they've frankly, as a pastor's child, a pastor's kid, I have grown up hearing churches and pastors talk about this doctrine that we're not supposed to get involved, separation of church and state, which we've addressed that a number of times on this podcast and all. And we go down the rabbit hole. I mean, we'd explain it all and empower people with the information to address it.
Yeah.
But your perspective is pretty unique here because you're going, like I said, across the country. And first of all, I just want to say, I personally honor you, and I know on behalf of For Liberty and Justice, we honor you because we need men like you, and women too, especially, but men out there fighting. And as a little tinge of fun, I think it's hilarious that you're a tall white man and you're over here telling women what they can do with the babies that God blessed them with. And by the way, I'm really going to hit home hard on this one. This is fun. I know women have been told that they don't, white men shouldn't tell them what to do, but it's actually a fact of the matter that women love to have babies. Women want to be mamas. It's inherent in their DNA. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But we're not supposed to say those things, right? We're not supposed to say you want to get married and have children. Your career, you don't want it. Now, there's some women who do, but you want to be a mama. And all the women are saying yes and amen. I love that. Yes, I want the man to provide. I want him to go to work so I can stay home and clean the house and enjoy being with my children. That's what God created us to do.
Yep.
We got to preach that truth.
Yep.
And is there anything else that you want to provide that's on your mind and on your heart? With just a few minutes left here, I want to give you the floor to sort of address whatever you feel is necessary to address on this pro-life front that we have coming up, that we're currently on, especially coming to the last few years of Trump being in power and beyond that.
Oh, well, I'm sure you and I could talk for another hour.
I'm positive.
But maybe we'll have to do it another time. But it's super important for people to tell other people what they can't do with their body. That's why we have laws against streaking. So you can't get naked and run through the park.
I got in trouble with that in New Hampshire when I was a legislator. Not streaking, but telling women they couldn't go topless nude, and then I ended up on CNN and everything.
Yeah, well, these butch third wave feminists, they love to take their shirts off when they're doing these activist stuff, and it's good to have a law saying you can't do that. So that's the state telling you there are things you can't do with your body. We have various forms of illegal drugs, and we're saying you can't do that to your body. You can't put that in your body. There are plenty of examples of things you can't do with your body.
That's exactly
one
right.
of those, shocker, should be you shouldn't be able to murder children with the strength of your body, or pay someone else to do it. Maybe it is God's humor that I'm a 6'3" cisgender white Christian male.
I love it.
Enforcing, dominating stereotypes of heteronormativity. But of course, that's what we have to get back to if we're going to save this culture. J.D. Unwin wrote this book called Sex and Culture decades ago, and he studied, most human civilizations over a 5,000-year period. And he found a 100% correlation between sexual, unmoored, weird, kooky insanity and the eventual decay and destruction of that civilization. But he also found a 100% correlation between sexual, monogamous, heterosexual, marriage-based cultures and cultural advancement.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be a Christian. You should be, but you don't need to be a Christian to agree with that. That's observable history. That's observable fact. Right. The path we're going down right now in America, if we don't stop, and if the church, the most powerful organism for change in the world, the local church, the blood-bought bride of Christ, led by shepherds,
amen,
don't wake up and begin proclaiming the truth of the Word of God and the Scriptures and bringing it into conflict with what we're seeing happen in the culture.
Yeah.
And actually discipling their people. So most people are sitting in churches, right? And they're, forget the Episcopalians and the Unitarians and the United Methodists, right? They're basically all apostate denominations now. Well, the Unitarians actually never were even Christians, actually, but the Episcopalians and the United Methodists used to be Christians, and they're now apostate denominations. So forget them. But most Christians are sitting in churches, and they're going, "What is happening to my culture? What is happening at my kid's school? What is happening?" And they're actually like pleading for clarity, and hope.
Yeah,
I think a lot of families having kids, I think a lot of grandparents are really hopeless and discouraged at the direction they see the country going. And why? It's because they care about their family. And so they know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, the ultimate test for a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to its children. So what a great test.
Yeah,
like, how do you know that you have a somewhat healthy civilization led by somewhat mature adults who understand the value of sacrifice? How do you know that? The kind of world that you hand to the next generation. That's a great test as to the health of your country, your society, and your republic. When the church, I mean, you remember when what's-his-name came to America? Forgot his name right now.
Bill Clinton?
No. I did not have sex with that woman. No, when what's-his-name came to America and he said, looking for the greatness of America. Alexis
Tocqueville.
When Tocqueville comes to America.
Yes.
And he said, and I don't have it memorized anymore, but I looked for the greatness of America in her esteemed Congress and her wide rivers and he travels the country and he goes, "Where's the greatness for America? And what makes America great?" And he said, "It was not until I went to the churches, the pulpits of America, ablaze with righteousness,
amen,
that I understood what made America great." America is, and if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great, right? So, I mean, the church has always been the compass for the culture. It's the conscience of the state. My friend Bill Federer says that every king in monarchies always had a counselor.
Yep.
But in America, who's the king? He asked this question. I guess the king is the people. We the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we don't have a king, so we all vote, and everything's local. And you can pass laws at the city level that don't get passed at the state level. You can pass laws at the county level that don't get passed at the state level. You can pass laws at the state level that don't get passed at the federal level. Wow, this localized government thing, and it's we the people getting together, and it's like, wow, okay, so we're the king. Each one of us are the king in America. So if every king has always had a counselor and we the people are the king in America, then who's the counselor to the king in this analogy? The church, the pulpits.
Yep.
The pulpits are the counselor to the people who then determine the direction of the republic.
That's exactly right.
So the pulpit and the teachers, the churches bear like way more responsibility and authority for the direction of the republic. I mean, King George is the one who coined the phrase, the Black Robe Regiment.
I didn't know.
Have you heard of the Black Robe Regiment?
Oh, we just talked about it on the previous episode.
So you know about John Peter Muhlenberg?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Love him.
I found and was able to purchase John Peter Muhlenberg's album Amicorum, which is basically the equivalent of a yearbook. So instead of pictures that, when you ask your in senior year in the last week, will you sign my yearbook and write a note? But in the founding era, they were just empty journals. They were empty pages. And you would ask friends, a mentor, a family member, a pastor to write in a prayer for you, to write in their favorite Bible verse, to write you a note. I was able to find and purchase John Peter Muhlenberg's original 1770s, I think it was from the 1770s.
Sounds about
personal album Amicorum with his name etched in gold on the front cover.
Come on.
But he's the one that the directors and producers of The Patriot with Mel Gibson ripped off of that original scene. So people who've seen Patriot, do you remember when that pastor of the local church, he takes off his clerical robe?
Yes, he does.
And he reveals the uniform of the Continental Army.
That's right. Yep.
And then he quotes from Ecclesiastes. There is a time for peace and there is a time for war.
That's right.
And he says, now is the time for war. And he asks all of the men in his congregation to stand up as well and to enlist in the Continental Army, which is a regiment that still stands today in Virginia to this day.
That's great.
Because a pastor got political.
Yes.
And helped win the Revolutionary War. King George, can I say the word pissed? So pissed at the direction of the war, said it was that Black Robe Regiment.
Yes.
The black robes referring to the preaching robes that a pastor would wear. Those stupid pastors who got political and defeated us. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, Josh, is politics doesn't matter because I say it matters. The church's influence to direct America isn't as great as I'm saying because I say so. I'm saying this is observable history.
Yes.
I'm saying that King George blamed the local churches of America for winning us our independence.
Right.
De Tocqueville said that this was why America was great. If we don't get back to that, we will lose our republic forever. And a government big enough to define who is a person and who isn't, and to remove the right to life to an entire class of human beings, unborn children,
right,
is big enough to do that to anyone else as well. So even if those listening don't have a personal burden in their chest for the unborn, you should care about it, if for no other reason, for selfish reasons.
Right.
And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you can't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right. Right? There's a reason that our founders created an order of rights. Right. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because those other rights don't mean anything if you can be slaughtered in the name of radical feminism.
Exactly it.
Right. So every forward movement of the secular moral revolution was hailed as an advance for freedom from the oppressive moral rules of the past. But in reality, every step empowered the state.
Yeah.
Every step empowered the state. So we used to assume that those who were biologically human were persons. But now, in Roe versus Wade, the state said that some biological humans are not persons.
Yep.
And we're going to define which humans are persons and which aren't. So we handed power over to the state to tell us who has rights and who doesn't.
Correct.
Because we ignored God's natural order. God's natural order. And of course, all humans are persons. There's no such thing as a human non-person. It's the same mistake that Dred Scott v. Sanford made.
Yep.
Said the black person wasn't a person.
Exactly.
They didn't say they weren't biological humans. They said they weren't persons.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue to repeat the same mistake.
Same old thing. There's nothing new under the sun.
The fountainhead of all this, or rather maybe the foundation for where all these things go wrong or where they get restored, is the local church. So we have to make the local church great again. So I guess my final word would be, first they came for the unborn. And we did not speak up because we were not unborn. And then they came for marriage. And many of us didn't speak up because we were single. And then they came for the children in public schools. And many of us did not speak up because, hey, we homeschool. It's not my fight. And one day they'll come for you. And one day you'll be like Lot in a Sodom and Gomorrah culture. And you'll be the only one called righteous. And then eventually, one day, the mob will come to your front door, as they do to Lot. And they'll say, bring the people out that you have with you in there because we want to rape them in the public square. That's what happens in this scene.
Yeah.
You then, at that point, if you don't heed the warnings of Josh and myself and for Liberty and Justice and the people who are actually in the fight, and the church continues down its stream of apathy and silence and cowardice, eventually this scene will happen to you or to your children or grandchildren in their later days. And at that point, they will, or you will have to make the decision to either be like Lot and fold like a cheap suit and offer up your own children to the demonically inspired mob, or stand as a bulwark between the evil threatening the next generation and those behind you. G.K. Chesterton once said that the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him.
Amen.
So yes, we should hate evil, but because we hate evil, or rather we hate evil because we love those that evil targets.
That's exactly right.
I just hope that we don't have to get to the point to where that agenda shows up at the front door of the righteous and says, hand over your children and we're going to rape them too. because those scenes are actually starting to happen right now in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I'm not exaggerating. Fathers have lost Jeff Younger in Texas. Lost his own parental rights to his own child who was chemically castrated and will never have children, a minor. That's the state coming to the front door of the family.
Right. You're absolutely right.
You will no longer be a parent to your child. We're going to take the kid. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, who's allegedly married to a dude, just signed a bill so that if a father dead names his child and doesn't refer to his child by their preferred pronouns and new name, that he could be sued for child abuse.
It's sick.
So that bill was signed in the state of Colorado, everyone, 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was very recent.
So I'm not like doing doom and gloom stuff about 40 years hence.
No,
I'm saying some of this is happening now.
Right.
So I guess my last statement is, unless the church flatulent becomes the church militant, it will become the church irrelevant.
Very, very well said. And I know none of what you're saying is hyperbolic whatsoever. It's very real. It's at our front doorstep, and it needs to be pushed back on. And it is for that reason that we are thankful for you, Seth, for being on the front lines. And like I said, at the beginning of the show, and we say it at the end here too, because it is one of our values. We honor you for your authenticity, your courage, and your boldness to step out in faith and fight this good fight, because it is a fight, and it is good that you are doing, and you are literally doing God's work, and we appreciate it. We honor you for that. So hopefully one day we can have you back to have a longer conversation. But that is all the time we have. Church, you need to take a stand. You need to step up. And this isn't just a demand. It's an assignment. It's a call in your life, not from me. Just because I'm looking at the camera don't matter. It's in Scripture. We just talked about Genesis chapter 1. So heed the advice and the courage of Seth Gruber here and the stuff we've talked about on the show, the content, and all the other podcast episodes. So with that, be blessed, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the For Liberty and Justice podcast, where we seek to mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice in the governmental realm. Hey, look, we'd love for you to follow us on all of our social media at For Liberty and Justice. Subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. And if you're looking to get involved, we'd love for you to either launch a chapter or join a chapter in your local area so we can keep fighting for liberty and justice together. You can do that by going to forlibertyandjustice.us and signing up today. Let's keep fighting to mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice together.